service manager and a trainer walk into a podcast? There's no punchline. It's Fixed Ops Focus with Dave Rogers and Steve Shaw.
Welcome back to Fixed Ops Focus, everybody. It's great to be here with you. It's great to be here with Mr. Dave Rogers. What's going on, Dave?
How you doing there, buddy? How's things?
I'm doing awesome. I'm doing
I
awesome.
I got to smile a little more. I had one of my guys tell me I look like a grouchy old F the other day on the live version. I started laughing. I'm like, well, I lost a tooth, so I didn't really feel like smiling, and I didn't want to look like a hillbilly, and he's still making fun of me. So I'm gonna try to smile more, everyone. Sorry about that.
Awesome. I had a guy, I might have said this on an episode a long time ago. I watched a guy talk about debating and everything, and he goes, no matter what, just have a smile on your face. And I'm generally a happy person anyway. I'm always smiling about it. I mean, listen, I got a great life. I have a wonderful company and great people that work for me. And I get to talk to people like you and people all around the country every day. So I got nothing to be unhappy about in my world. But I'm always in a positive mood.
That's great.
You want to hear a funny story?
I do.
So trainer walks into a store with a parrot on his shoulder. So I'm not sure how to phrase this properly, so I'm just going to say it, right? So I go into a store recently, and there's about 8 technicians, 3 or 4 service advisors, a couple people on vacation. Say to the service manager, what are we going to do today? His response is, I don't know. Okay. Are you practicing what you were taught? What do you mean? How many alignments are you selling? I don't know. How many alignments can you do? I'm not real sure. Right. So every question that was asked was, I don't know. I'm not sure. Right. And we were sort of blown away because, for one, how can you not know? And two, how can you not know? Right. You are that manager, and that is your job in life. Right. So before I tell you more, what do you think about that? I know that wouldn't happen in a Dave Rogers store, but what do you think about that situation?
Well, I'd say that at least your trainer's in the right place to start, right? This guy definitely needs some training. Hopefully this is your first visit there.
Yes.
I doubt it, though.
Yes, it is. It is the first.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, I think that there's people in this business that just do that. They just go into work, they clock in, they either they're reactive to everything that's happening, so they don't sit down and run the reports and look at their numbers and stuff like that, or they're just not qualified sometimes. So continue on. It couldn't have ended there, because that would have been a very quick, funny story.
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, the interesting part is it was our first visit to that store. They are
Okay.
a newer client, their first visit, right?
That's good to know for Steve Shaw training customers out there that this wasn't your 20th visit and the guy still didn't know.
After 1 year, the service manager, thank you for that testimonial. No, it was our first visit, and we were given direction, that, but it is funny, or it's interesting, not funny, it's interesting. Kind of going back to our previous episode about working in the business, on the business, and so on. This gentleman was a technician and got promoted. So more of a technician mindset. My expectation would have been differently. A technician mindset would be like, I got to take care of my guys. I got to get them work. I got to feed them. Right. I was a tech. And his mindset was more like, I got to take care of my guys. I don't want to overwhelm them, and as a numbers guy, I'm a sales guy, right? I sell. I kind of let the chips fall where they may sometimes from a sales perspective. But as a numbers guy, I want to know, how many hours can I do today? I got 8 techs. How many hours can they flag? And I'm always, going down that path. And so it was funny. I mean, the ending up of that story, becomes setting production objectives, having a meeting, going out there every single day and talking to people. So, we were able to get that accomplished over a couple of days, getting those things done. How many alignments can you sell today? How many can be done on this rack? So we were able to get those things accomplished. That's not a sales pitch. It's just exactly, that's what happened, but it kind of goes back to the story that, did we put the right person in place? Did we give that person the tools, or, because this guy didn't just get hired yesterday. This gentleman has been there for a long, long time. So it just strikes me as, how do we put people in these positions without giving them the tools that they need to do the job?
Yeah, I mean, we have mentioned it before, and sometimes this happens with, a technician or a high performer person. This person might have been a high performing technician, making a lot of hours. A lot of times the personality of that person is very selfish, right? And they're just worried about themselves. So they can't really just flip the switch and now all of a sudden start caring about everybody else. They're more worried about survival and, oh my God, we're shorthanded today. Oh my God, somebody called out sick. Oh, we got to, call, let's reschedule appointments, whatever the case may be. Because, they're in CYA mode too. That's the other one. And technicians do that naturally.
Yeah.
I've said it before is, when I first started, I came from the shop, I had a pause in between, which gave me a chance to reflect when I was recovering from my accident. But, when I came back, I still had that mindset where, if you asked me, hey, I tell you need an alternator, it's going to be $400. And you say, well, will you guarantee that'll fix the car? The first reaction was, well, I can't guarantee anything. Who am I? I'm the amazing Kreskin. I can't see what's going, you know what I mean? And then you realize after a while that, yeah, I can guarantee it. My tech said you need an alternator. You need an alternator. It's going to guarantee you fix your car. And I think sometimes these guys get promoted from the shop. They don't know it. There's nobody to teach them. There's no one to train them. There's no one to coach them. Maybe they figure it out themselves, or maybe they, like you said, you had that gunslinger mentality, and you came out with gunslinging, right? So everybody, there's different personalities, but this same guy that you're talking about, I'm sure that the minute something goes south, he's cocooned up. He's shutting down the faucet. He's turning, I guarantee you that's what they do because I've seen it a million times, the technician mindset, or they stop selling. I've seen places before where they just stop recommending things.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody they need brakes today unless they're red. What? Like, what do you mean? Oh, we can't get the work done. What? Like, that doesn't make any sense,
It's crazy how that happens. I mean, Cindy was trained for me for a long time, and she ended up in Idaho one day, and they promoted their shop foreman, longtime veteran, been there forever, good man, good employee. Sat down in the chair his first day. She was there on his first day, so kudos to the dealer for bringing us out. And he looked at Cindy and goes, "What do I do now?" Like, had no idea. But I mean, just the best person ever, right? So maybe he was right for the role because of his status, his role, his attitude and everything. And again, he said, "What do I do?" And so kudos to the dealer. Cindy was there and said, "Okay, now let's talk." Right. So that was fantastic. And again, kudos to the dealer for doing that on day one. I think Cindy was at a store up in Washington, kind of the same thing. There was a new manager promoted from the shop, a female was promoted. The dealer called me specifically to have Cindy come out and work with her. I think she was there for like 30 days. And so Cindy went out after she got her feet on the ground, kind of, drank out of the fire hose for 30 days. And then Cindy got to go out and work with her and kind of give her some tools and help structure that day. So, that's important. That's good. That's, I think that's a dealer doing the right thing and giving the new person a little bit of time, as well as giving them, now here's the tools, right? Now, these are your expectations. But to put somebody in there to check the box, fill the shoes, or, and walk away, is almost like a dereliction of duty. I hate to say that, oh, just do that. Just don't let anybody come up and see me. Just do not let anybody come to my office. And that could be the mentality as well. Is I don't want to be bothered.
Well, I mean, it's the awareness that person has, maybe needs coaching or training in that area, right? It's, not everybody knows that, right? And not every general manager is going to be able to recognize that. I try to, I get under people's skin currently in this organization. I know I get under their skin because I will point out things that I know aren't in people's comfort zones, right? I know it. Because I'm trying to push them, and I don't, and maybe I don't always do it the right way, but sometimes time is not in your favor, but you bring things to someone's attention, like we mentioned the training in one of the last episodes is I look at the report. I got a store where the manager and nobody in the store signed up for the training. We have the university. There's no reason for that. Now I'm not going to send an email directly to that manager because I know that he or she would not take it well. Right. So I spoke with, I didn't even do it. I think I said a snippet, but I spoke with the guy running the store and I said, please bring this to her or his attention because I don't want to, ruffle any feathers. But, the bottom line is that they're not taking the training. Right. And the store's underperforming. It's not hitting the levels it needs to be hitting at. So so that's the kind of stuff that I have to try to do, or that I think I should try to do, because not everybody's a Steve Shaw, right? I mean, and listen, if you were one of my service managers, I might have to tell you to go do X, Y, Z. Hey, Steve, this shop's a mess. It needs to be cleaned. Or, you know what I mean? Or, you got 200 Google reviews that haven't been responded to. Somebody needs to fix this, right? Because you're going to be out there slinging a gun and shooting,
Voicemail was my nemesis, bro. Fuck that voicemail. I ain't answering the voicemail.
Right.
I would do this,
Right.
delete, delete, delete.
Right. Right. But you're going to have 200% upsell on alignments, right? And again, I mentioned it the other day, we had one store that talking to the service manager, and we look at last month, and the technicians had recommended 100 alignments and they only sold 13, right? And it's like, well, how do you guys not notice this? And it just, he wasn't looking at it. He wasn't looking at the advisors. And the GM now has been having meetings with the advisors. And now there's a clipboard on the alignment rack and there's a waiting list, right? Because it's just a matter of bringing it back to their attention. You got to bring them back to center, right? And that's something where, it's the prodding, it's that awareness. I had the conversation with them, and I think that when you look at these things, not everybody can see it. And I'm not bragging about it. I'm not patting myself on the back, but that's the challenge that I think most people don't have. Is you got a service manager that came from the shop. He was a foreman, and he sat in that chair. What if Cindy wasn't there that day?
Right.
Right? What if there was no Dave Rogers? What if there was no Cindy Lawrence? What if there, like that? That's the challenge, is that he could still be sitting in that chair, wondering what he does next, right?
Well, it's a
All these
year
years
later, right?
later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. We ended up, like everybody now has some sort of reporting tool, whether it's Chameleon, Accessa, Dynatron, like all the tools out there, right? So there's reports. It could just be your Reynolds and Reynolds, right? I mean, it could just be your daily, it could just be your job stack report that comes out, right? So we all have access to those, to those tools. But what I found interesting, and another thing that we did is I went on Claude and I said, Claude, make me a checklist, make me an advisor checklist. And it was basically how many hours, how many tickets did I write? How many hours did I sell? And how many menu opportunities and alignments, right? Just 4 or 5 things, right? And I said, every advisor, walk this into your manager every day. Just let your manager know how many tickets you wrote. So that way, all of a sudden now, I, as an advisor, had to look at myself and so on. So I wasn't waiting for the manager to give me the numbers and so on. And then I said to the manager, basically the same thing, is I give you, 5 things to look at today. How many hours, how many tickets did you write? How many hours were available, and how many hours did you sell, right? And, very basic things to get your mind around, instead of going, hey, look, we got an Accessa report or Chameleon dashboard that's got 50,000 numbers, which I don't even expect you to understand any of that stuff. But I do expect you to understand very, very, very basics. And so by giving them those few basics, the advisors can hand it to the manager can hand it to the GM, and they can talk about it at a noon meeting. They decided to do a 12 o'clock noon meeting, with their 10-person service department. And I'm like, that's cool, right? And so hopefully, 90 days from now, when we go back, they're building that process, right? And if they want to change the report or do whatever, it's great. This is just a guide. This is a tool so that you grasp the basics, I guess,
Well, you have to grasp, right? It's building the foundation. You got to have the basics done. You got to have some, there's got to be some solid foundation you're going to build on. And I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make, right? I used this example years ago, and I just, it's, so we had at a store I was at, we had this, she was a customer relations manager. She was responsible for hiring the cashiers and the receptionist, right? It was a toilet store. There was one main desk where you'd have 1 or 2 receptionists. They answered all the phones. They did a bunch of stuff, right? So, Jackie, who had come from that job, she was the customer relations manager. So she knew all aspects of that job that was behind that desk. So she would get frustrated because she'd hire people and they couldn't do the job. Now, it was a $12 an hour job, right, that they were paying at the time. So she would lose it. And she was the sweetest woman. She's customer relations, she really did a great job on all that stuff, but she would get so frustrated. So I'm sitting down with her one day and I'm asking her, I'm like, Jackie, why are you so damn frustrated? Like, what's going on? She goes, well, they can't get it. I'm like, well, what do they have to get? Like, so she goes, well, I said, what do they have to do? She's like, all right, they have to answer the phones. They have to check out service customers. They have to check out sales customers. They have to make receipts, whatever it is. They're responsible for all the license plates. The keys are back there. The deal jackets are back there. They are also asked to do a handful of other things from the accounting office as needed, right? And then plus. So I said, okay. I said, and this job pays $12 an hour, right? I said, so she goes, yeah, but I did it. I did it for years and everything. I said, well, let me ask you a question, Jack. When you first started that job, when you're day one, did you do all those things? Or did you just answer the phone? Well, I answered the phone and I took money. Okay, but did you have the license plate? No, the building was different then. Oh, did you do that? No, I didn't. I said, so you're taking this new person off the street And this is where I think I came up with the 64 ounces, the 32 ounces, the 16 ounces. I said, you're giving this poor girl 64 ounces of fluid and she has an 8-ounce Dixie cup, if that, right? And it was an awareness like I learned then, and it was a real casual conversation. It was very organic. It wasn't planned. And I think, it opened her eyes too, is like, you're dumping all this crap on somebody on day one because the previous person did it. Well, let's look back. How long was that previous person there? Oh, they were there 10 years. Oh, they probably picked up more things to do over 10 years than their regular job, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what happens. We all make that mistake. Well, Steve did that. He was a service manager. He retired. You can do it. Like, no, wait, it takes time. You have to learn.
Well, that kind of goes to the other side of the coin, is like where we would bring people out of the store. Maybe you go to a training class or you go to a 20 group or whatever. How many people rush out? I got to take a break, and they rush out and they're all on their telephone and they all got to check in with the store. Listen, if I'm out of the store today, I promise you, I ain't calling in, right? And if I've got to call in on break to find out how many calls do we make? Did this happen? Did that happen? That means Steve, did not do a good job of preparing my people for that day that I'm not there, right? And I sort of, it cracks me up when I see that, right? If you have to leave and your store's going to fall down if you don't check in at 10, 12, and 2, well, maybe you're not preparing your people well enough for your absence.
Well, there's that, right? There's people that either they don't see it or it's job security. They don't want to train anybody. I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make is not training somebody to be your number two, to be there when you're not there. They're all worried about they're going to take my job. And, I get it. We've all been in situations, I think, in the car business where you have trained your replacement. But, I've always felt that, and you'll learn over time that I want to raise everybody that works for me up as much as I can. And that makes my life easier, or it frees me up to do bigger and better things. Right. That's kind of the way I always looked at it. Because you're right. If you have to be on the phone all the time, and it's not like, listen, if you just started the job today, different story. Right? You're in your first month or two, different story. But you've been there for a year, you've been there for a period of time, and you still have to check in every 15-minute break, right? There's an issue. There's definitely a lack of management going on in that dealership,
It cracks me up. I always say, listen, I've never missed a lunch in my tenure as a manager. I am going to lunch, and unless the place is burning down, do not call me. And I did work at a dealership where it did burn down. There was a fire on a Tuesday night, and I did show up. They did call me, and I actually answered my phone at 5:00 in the morning, and I did go into work at 5 a.m. Right, but the place burned down. But other than that, please do not call me, because yes, somebody needs to be able there. And look, if you're going to do that too, if somebody makes a decision and it's not the one you would make, okay. They made a decision. You weren't there. That's the coaching opportunity. That's the chance where you get to say, thank you for taking care of that. You made your best decision. Maybe we could have done it differently on the next round, right? But I'm not going to get mad at somebody for making a decision when I'm not there. They did it the best that they knew how, the best they were trained. And so make a decision, right or wrong. It's okay to fail. It is. This is the car business. I think car dealers are going to last a lot longer than any of us will. And so if somebody makes a poor decision, what's it going to do? Cost me a couple bucks? I mean, come on. We spend more than that on donuts.
Yeah. That's the thing too. I mean, you get all riled up for $100 or $200, and I get it. I mean, listen, when I was running the Chevy Cadillac store, my mantra was, don't do dumb. Right. That was the mantra, because that's what they did. They had lost all this money over and over again because they just did dumb stuff. Now, I would harp on the dumb stuff if it was $100, if it was $50 or it was $2,000, it didn't matter. But, once you got it up and running and you got everybody out of there where they started thinking on their feet and they did the job, we didn't squabble over a couple pennies. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't going to beat them up over that. As long as the reason something didn't happen was because we did something dumb, that was my thing. If you made a mistake, an honest mistake, if if something changed, a customer came in, they needed something, they needed a tire fixed, and take it upon yourself to do it, goodwill, that was fine. But the dumb stuff was, we would send the truck in a Hummer in the back and put running boards and tires and do all this stuff and spend $5,000 in accessories, and the idiots up front wouldn't cost it out in the deal, right? That was dumb, right? We owe somebody floor mats and we didn't set it up in the deal. That was dumb. It just, and that's the thing you have to get through their head. If you make a decision and it's the wrong decision, I'll discuss the decision-making process with you, but I'm not going to question you in front of everybody, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're not going to do it, and that was another, that's another reason why I always say to the service managers and service advisors and GMs is make sure, let people make the decision, but make sure it's in writing why you did it. So if I'm writing an RO and I'm giving Steve Shaw a free oil change because the wait was too long or a goodwill, hey, Steve Shaw, good one-time goodwill, free oil change to whatever, recover the customer, whatever the thing is, there's, apologies for taking too long or, whatever it is, one-time goodwill, put it in there. So if I look at the RO and I see it and I see an explanation, I'm going to move on with life. But if you don't put a note in there, then, then I'm going to question you. What is this for? Why did you do it? Right. And then, we can have a discussion whether it was the right decision or wrong decision. But, like I said, as long as it wasn't a dumb decision, I never had a problem with it.
Well, my buddy Don Crowder from Saturn Corporation, I love saying this. He taught me this. I said it once before. Here's the decision-making process. Live by it my whole life. Is it right for the customer? Is it right for the dealership? Then what does it cost, right? Let's do the right thing for the customer, the dealership, and then it costs what it costs, and if we always make the decision based on the right thing, it's the right thing. You can't go wrong. Nobody can argue with you.
So my thing's been, and I don't know when I developed this, but I call it my 3 C's. All right. It's not cause, complaint, correction. My 3 C's are the customer, the company, and my coworkers. That's my 3 C's. So is the decision good for the customer? Is it beneficial or is it good for the company? And how does it impact my employees? Right. So there's sometimes when you're going to ask somebody to do something and they're not going to get paid for it. Right. So, but in that case, it's good for the customer, it's good for the company because we're going to long-term loyalty. There's other times when you might make a decision, maybe it's good for the company and maybe it's good for the customer, maybe it's good for the employee, but that's where I'm going to give the customer something that's $500. I'm paying my technician the full 5 hours and the company's eating it. Right. That's so like I always say, is the balancing act of those 3 things. And then sometimes you're going to make a decision that's not good for us. It's just not. It's, but as I always told my staff and I think I developed this in Turnersville is, if it wasn't for the customer, there would be no company. All right. And if there wasn't for a company, these coworkers that were all around, we'd be picking corn in a cornfield because there'd be no dealership here. Right.
That's true.
So let's keep it in mind. This customer has to come first, company has to come, and then the coworkers. I mean, it's 1A, 1B, but you have to put a priority. Without the customer, we got nothing. So sometimes we're going to take in the shorts. It's just going to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We hate in 2026 to say the customer's always right because, sometimes they're not. But like you said, without them, we are nothing. And so we do have to look at it from that perspective. And as some of the silly shit that has happened to me, I can look at it from the dealer perspective and say, yeah, Steve, you're 30 miles from the store. We don't pick up and deliver. Too bad you bought a Wagoneer, but you're 30, 40 miles away. That's a dealership decision. But then you go, well, wait a minute. I did spend a lot of money. And then I go, and if you look at the research that the person that passes multiple stores to come to yours, their repair orders is going to be 2 or 3 times, 5 times larger than the ones that are next to you. So was it a good decision that you make, right? So sometimes we're penny wise and pound foolish, or, we step over our dollars to pick up pennies, right? So I can look at it from I try to look at it from both sides of the equation or both sides of the coin right now. But like you said, if I'm a customer and I need something, it's really the dealership's role is to take care of me. And ultimately, then that's where that loyalty to that particular store is going to come into play. It's funny enough, I've been getting calls from the dealership local to me. How was your service? How was your service? And they recommended a bunch of fluid maintenance products to me, which I declined on my Wagoneer. They didn't recommend the alignment, but they recommend me a bunch of fluid maintenance stuff. And I declined it. And now they're calling me to sell me the stuff that I had declined. They still haven't called me to buy the alignment. You
It's
know,
because the
on
damn advisor never noted it on the decline. That's why you just, it's crazy. The tech didn't either, right? So it's just total failure. They don't want to do alignments. It's crazy.
we kind of
You
got
know,
far
it's
off, we got far off of our subject here of
no,
people in a role that maybe they don't belong, but maybe
but
that's why.
yeah, but I think it's all part of the same thing. I mean, when you're looking at these things and it's the graduation from one level to another to another to another for the individual, whether it's a cashier, whether it's a service advisor, whether it's a service manager. There has to be somebody helping them with those levels. And I agree. I mean, you can't just hammer somebody on day one, say, okay, here's the reporting tool. Here's this, here's that. Like I watched Penske back before it was Penske, it was called United Auto Group. And I used to watch this. It was crazy. So they would buy a store and they would come in. It's a mom and pop store, right? We bought these stores in Connecticut. They were all great people that worked there, but it was a mom and pop store. It was run very, very conservatively. And they would come in on the day of the closing. And, these experienced controllers that didn't have great personalities,
Right.
IT guys, they'd all come in, they'd replace every computer in the place. They'd put a new DMS in. All right. And it didn't matter what you were on. You were going to get rentals and rentals. That's just the way it worked, right? They're going to change your chart of accounts. Okay. So behind the scenes, they would do a conversion. So day one, when it went live, you had a clone of the image. So, and they would do all that stuff and they'd be there for 3/4 of a day. And then they'd say, see you later. Welcome to, and it used to be called United Auto Group. And I used to call it, they got UGGed, UAG, UGGed, right? And you'd walk into these stores. My boss, it was about 4 times we'd buy the store, and then like 30 within the first month, my boss would send me up there and say, "Hey, there's an issue with." Once it was ADP at the time we were using. There was an issue with chaining of accounts. Like there was like they ran a trial balance and they ran a financial statement, and it showed like 100% gross profit for every labor category, right? And I knew the computer system pretty good, so they'd send me up there and they'd say, "Hey, can you go work on the labor types and fix it?" And invariably the clone, the image they used was wrong, and they would never fix it. It was just
Right,
it was
right.
just one of the things. But I'd go up there and I'd start talking to these girls in the office and I'd talking to the guys and stuff, and they were all in shock still 15, 20 days later. And that's what I always remember is like that's the way they brought people into the business. Now, hopefully they do it differently. I've been having one with them in 10 years. I assume they didn't change their tactics over the years that I was with them, but I think they had some nicer people involved in the acquisition team. So at least they sugarcoated it a little bit. But it's the same thing with a new employee. You just hammer him with all this information or her with all this information, I even said to one of the CFOs one time, I said, how would you like it if I came into your office and I redid your Rolodex with everyone's phone number was in a different place? Well, I wouldn't like that. I go, well, you just did that to that whole complex you bought. Like you changed their chart of accounts overnight without even telling them. You changed their computer system without telling. Like they had no idea what they were walking into. Welcome to the team, guys. We'd love to have you. So, but I think we do that on a daily basis. Just not as brutal as that used to be.
They moved your cheese, right? Or we should do an episode on I love this is the dreaded DMS change. I mean, what a debacle. I absolutely I have so many clients that are go, oh, we're going from dealer track to Reynolds, or we're going from here to here. And what even more I'm going to say frustrates Steve is they'll tell me they're going to do a DMS change. And I'll say, have you ever done it before? No, first time. And so I'll pull out my handy dandy checklist that Steve Shaw has on some things that are important to do. I got it, Steve. Nah, no. They told us, the DMS company told it's going to be no problem. It's always a no brainer. Don't worry about it. Right. 3 weeks later, how you feeling? We're fucked right now. Right. Sorry. I had a checklist, but you didn't want to hear it, right? You know what I mean? Because the DMS company told you how wonderful and how easy it was going to be. And I've yet to see one ever go easy. And you're right, man. It just, those things are the worst possible.
It's terrible, but it's this sudden impact, right? It's painful for any employee, anybody in any situation when change happens suddenly. You're inundated with information. You feel like, there's just there, and that's where I think we make a mistake a lot of times with that new service manager, that new advisor. We just don't take the time to teach them. I used to have a thing when I was with the public and we were on rentals. You know, it was a big company with a lot. Have you ever worked on Reynolds? No. Did you ever work with the brand Toyota? No. Have you ever worked for Penske? No. That's 3 strikes. I wasn't. Unless it was unless it was a special situation, it was hard for me to spend the time teaching them all 3. Right. And especially the DMS, like if you didn't have the ability, it would be very difficult for me to put you in front of a customer if you could not operate the DMS. Right. So, you know, that was always number one. I could teach you the brand, you know, I could teach you Penske, but I wasn't going to teach you all 3. I just don't have the time. It just, you know, so, you know, it's that with anything else. And again, you know, take your shop foreman out of the shop. The guy knows how to TK on his computer, knows how to put himself to work, knows how to take himself off, right? Maybe he knows how to put someone else on, right? But does he know how to write an RO? No. Does he know how to close an RO? Absolutely not. Does he know how to run a report? No. And that's what we do to people. Here you go. Welcome to the team, Steve. Go, have at it. You know, here's your login.
Dave, we promise you, we're buying your store. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change until midnight tonight.
And in our company's case, we actually don't change anything as much as we don't have to. And there's good and bad to that, but I'd rather do it this way. Everybody doesn't blow out in the first week, and you're left, you know, running the place yourself. So, you know, but listen, any new employee, same thing. You start the job today, you know, like all the things, like as the original point of this was, what are we doing to this poor guy? You know, what are we doing to this girl? Right? You know. Here's a parts manager, starts today. Listen, you got your cycle return. It's due tomorrow. You better get it going. Like, if I was the parts manager, I'd quit, right? I'm not doing a cycle return in 24 hours. Yeah, I'm out of here, right?
I took over. I'll let you give us a GM tip of the day. I took over the store, Crenshaw Ford, downtown LA. And I was pretty seasoned manager, you know, Steve Shaw character. And my GM, the new GM, his name was Gary Greer. Gary was a sharp cat, right? So I take over this store, downtown LA. Still have a bunch of buddies from there. Sit down in the office one day, you know, do my thing, just getting to know everybody, meeting everybody. And the GM Gary comes in at the end of the day and he's like, how'd it go? And I'm like, pretty good. I think I got a pretty good handle on it. I go, give me a couple days. I'll know the numbers. I'll have everything. I'll come up and see you. And he goes, couple days? You're going to know the numbers tomorrow, bro. And I was like, okay. Yep. You know, I was like, I think I'm working late tonight. So I'm like studying, you know, but I was a veteran, you know, I mean, I had the skills to go figure everything out, you know, and I got the message, you know, but we do that to people. We just light them on fire and see what they do, you know, so.
But not everyone can handle it. That's the thing. I mean, again, I had, you know, EJ did the same thing. We pull up to work one day and he goes, oh, by the way, I'm firing the parts manager in the Chrysler store today. I go, okay. And at the time, I was a service manager, parts and service director, really, for Hyundai, it was in the same building. I did warranty for both, for that, and I did warranty for a Chrysler and Hyundai, and I was service and parts director for the Hyundai store, and did warranty for Chrysler as well. And he pulls up and he goes, I'm going to fire the parts manager today in Chrysler. I go, okay. He goes, I need you to sit there. You're going to be the parts manager at Chrysler. I go, I don't know shit about parts. He goes, you will, and I'll see you at 10. I'm like, oh, well, so you know what I do? I learned parts, right? And, you know, but that's how you learn. It's how I learned anyway. So
that's it. Well, wrap us up. Give us a GM tip of the day.
GM tip of the day. I mean, again, know your people, know the situations you're put in there. Not everybody's a Dave Rogers. Not everybody's a Steve Shaw. Not everybody's any, you know, there's no one size fits all, right? So, you know, if you're going to make that move, and, you know, we just had one recently where, you know, you're going to let the service manager go. We could have talked about that again today. Let the guy go. You know, if we're going to promote from within, let's give the guy a chance to grow to the job. But no, you have to know these things. I mean, you just can't put people in situations. Steve said it originally. He said it earlier in the conversation, probably said it last time. Is about our hiring processes. Could you write up a rule book? I think we all know inside whether we're doing the right thing for people or not, right? I think, you know, our job is to make sure that we hire people to succeed. You know, we just don't hire to fill a body in a spot. And I think that, you know, that takes some awareness. So I think, you know, let's take a little time. Let's try to figure it out. I mean, we're all guilty of it. I'm not saying, you know, I'm any better than anybody else, but I do think we put people in situations where they're never going to survive. They're running behind this schedule the whole time. And, you know, and at some point it's destined to fail. And let's start building it the other way. Let's start building it to succeed. So that's my tip.
Awesome. Well, let's get out of here and look forward to seeing everybody on Fixed Ops Fridays. If you got any comments, any thoughts, your best war story of taking over a store, we would love to hear it, and we will read it, talk about it, and discuss it on air. Dave, I will catch up to you soon.
Talk to you later, bro.
Later.
Warning, not liking, subscribing, or sharing Fixed Ops Focus may cause CSI decline, missed appointments, technician fatigue, and a sudden inability to close menu sales. If symptoms persist longer than one period, see Dave Rogers and Steve Shaw immediately.